Hi, and welcome to this short introductory video about Advanced Biblical Hebrew. My name is Lily Kahn, and I'm Professor of Hebrew and Jewish Languages in the department. I just wanted to quickly talk to you about who this course is for and what we'll be covering. So, Advanced Biblical Hebrew is designed for students who have already done Intermediate Biblical Hebrew in the department, and it's a compulsory course for BA Ancient Language students in their final year or for students in an earlier year who have already completed Intermediate Biblical Hebrew. It's also an optional course for students on all other degrees. It's ideal for anyone with an interest in Hebrew grammar, historical linguistics, and comparative Semitic languages. You don't have to have studied any other Semitic languages in order to do the course, but if you have studied other Semitic languages, you'll find a lot that's of interest. The course is divided into 5 different sections, and each one will look at a different set of related topics. The idea behind this course is that you've already done 2 years of Biblical Hebrew and you've reached an advanced level of grammatical understanding, and you can read and translate texts independently. This course is really about moving beyond the actual study of Biblical Hebrew and more into linguistic debates about issues and questions that have to do with Biblical Hebrew grammar. So I'm sure you've noticed over the course of the last couple of years that there are a lot of different intriguing mysteries to do with various aspects of Hebrew grammar, such as the tense aspect system, or why there is a dagesh in the letter following the definite article, that kind of thing, which you've learned, but might be interested in looking at in a bit more detail to find out why these forms are as they are and what linguists and grammarians have suggested in terms of possible explanations for the mysteries of biblical Hebrew grammar. The first section of the course will be dedicated to looking at the history of Biblical Hebrew, and we'll do that in the first 5 weeks of term 1. So we'll look at Biblical Hebrew as a Northwest Semitic language, comparing it to the other most closely related languages, such as Ugaritic and Akkadian and other ancient Semitic languages. And then we'll look at the different historical layers of Biblical Hebrew according to the traditional understanding. So there are some texts that are considered to be archaic, some that are considered to be standard prose Biblical Hebrew. We'll also look at inscriptions from the biblical period, and then we'll look at the developments that happened in Hebrew after the Babylonian exile. So late Biblical Hebrew, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the transition into Rabbinic Hebrew, and we'll examine issues in the dating of Biblical Hebrew and some controversies surrounding the question of whether it's possible to date Biblical Hebrew texts on linguistic grounds, and if so, what are the best procedures for doing so. And then we'll also look at the development of the Hebrew writing system and how that affects our understanding of the biblical texts. Section 2 of the course is devoted to Biblical Hebrew nominal forms, so nouns, adjectives, numerals, and pronouns. And again, it's assumed that you already know how these forms work and that you're familiar with the systems, but there are a lot of questions as to how did they develop? Why do some masculine nouns have a plural ending ot, such as shulchan, shulchanot, and vice versa? What does noun gender come from, and what does it mean? Why do some nouns have more than one different plural form? Where does the definite article come from? Why is there such a crazy mismatch in the gender of numerals, where the masculine numerals look feminine and the feminine numerals look masculine? So these are all questions that we'll be looking at. And again, we'll be reading academic articles and we'll be looking at different explanations that linguists have given over the years and over the centuries, in some cases, to explain these different phenomena. Then section 3 moves on to examining the origins and functions of the biblical Hebrew verbal stems. We'll give a sort of a quick survey of the biblical Hebrew verbal stems, just as a sort of refresher, if anyone is a bit rusty since last year. And then we'll look at the kal passive, and the nifal, followed by what's traditionally been called the intensive stems, the ones with the doubled middle radical, the PL, the PUL, and the HITPAL, and then look at the, quote, causative stems, the HIFL and the HOFAL. And again, it's assumed that you know what these forms are, that you've learned them, you're familiar with their morphology and how they work in practice, but we're going to be looking at some more theoretical questions of what is the best way of describing the PL Is it intensive? Is it factative? Is it something else? And we'll look at different grammatical explanations that have been put forward by various linguists. Then on to section 4, which is about the mystery of the biblical Hebrew tense aspect system. Again, you are familiar with the different biblical Hebrew conjugations, the katal, the yiktol, the vayiktol, and the vekatal, or as they're also known, the perfect and the imperfect, and the vav consecutive. And then the other forms like the participle or the kotel, the volative, so, the cohortative, the imperative and the jussive, and then the infinitives. But again, we'll be looking a bit deeper and trying to understand how these forms came to be, what they're related to in other Semitic languages, and why they are so puzzling for linguists. The biblical Hebrew tense aspect system has baffled scholars for many centuries and will probably continue to do so. And so we'll be looking into some of the most intriguing questions, such as where does the vayiktol come from? Why does it cause a dagesh in the preformative? Is the vekatal a secondary form that developed based on the vayiktol, or was it there from the beginning? Can you find parallels for these forms in other ancient Semitic languages, and other questions of that nature? Then we have a concluding section at the end of term 2 on a syntactic topic, the particle hine and the related particle vehine. Where does it come from? What is it for? How does it relate to parallels in other Semitic languages? And then finally, we'll look at the transmission of Biblical Hebrew. What happened to Biblical Hebrew throughout the Biblical period and also after the Biblical period in the following centuries? Where did the vocalization system come from? We'll look at the different vocalization systems that developed before the one that we now know of as standard, the Tiberian system, became widespread. And we'll look at other ancient documentations of biblical Hebrew, such as transliteration into the Greek alphabet, for example, in the early centuries of the Common Era. I hope that this has given you something of an idea of what this course involves and what kind of issues and topics we'll be looking at. If you have any questions about the course before the beginning of the year, please feel free to contact me. Here is my email address, and I'll be very happy to hear from you. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you at the end of September.